Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watch You On. Thanks for logging on. Today we're looking at a watch from the greatest complete manufacturer you may never have heard of. This is the Parmigiani Tonda Hemispheres 42 millimeters in 18 karat rose gold. Now when I say that Parmigiani is the most integrated manufacturer period in the industry, I mean they are rivaling companies like Rolex, they are rivaling companies like the entire Swatch Group combined. This despite the fact that the company has only existed since 1996 and only went on its buying spree to acquire all that savoir-faire to bring in-house in the early 2000s. But they have gotten a running start, having provided movements and movement design to the likes of Chopard, BVLGARI, and yes, Richard Mille. I don't say it lightly when I say that this is one of the most integrated, vertically integrated watchmaking companies in the world. And you can see that this Tonda Hemispheres 42 millimeters in 18 karat rose gold is a big, bold watch. It gets a lot of mileage out of the high ratio of dial to bezel. The bezel being a slim golden halo around that ivory colored dial, and it reads as much bigger than its nominal 42 millimeters. But I'm going to note that on the wrist, this is a very easy watch to live with. Now my wrist is 6 1/3 inches, 16 centimeters in circumference, so this feels very comfortable to me, and not the least of which, or the least reason of which, is this strap by Hermé. Hermé has built all of the straps for Parmigiani for a number of years, so you get an outstanding quality of calfskin leather on the bottom, very supple against the skin. You can even see the quality of the coloration and the stitch here, and this is on the underside of the strap. Now on the top side, square scale alligator brown with a monotone stitch. You can see the folds on the side. You can see the bolstering as it approaches the case, all immaculate, beautifully made. This is like the highest quality of professional dressage saddle. I'd compare it to something like that. Absolute top quality saddle craft. That's Hermé at its best. And that might be the only aspect of the watch that Parmigiani doesn't take in-house, because everything you see here, from the case to the dial, the hands, and yes, every part of the movement inside, including the balance staff, the hairspring, all escapement components, and the balance wheel, fabricated by the Parmigiani family of companies in Fleurier. Now this watch is very comfortable because of these short, highly distinct lugs. It fits a small wrist easily, and you can see how it pulls straight down. My wrist is 6 1/3 inches in circumference, but if your wrist were even under 6 inches, you'd have no problem with this Tonda Hemispheres. I want to emphasize that it also sits quite low on the wrist, being only 11.5 millimeters thick. It's got a bit of a cupped shape to its case back, so it actually nestles into the wrist a little bit, even more than that nominal thickness would suggest. It only sits about 9.5, 10 millimeters above the skin, and with the tumble home on that bezel, you can see how it would be easy for a dress cuff to ride right up and over that. Now I've touted the ergonomic qualities of the strap, but I also want to tout the quality of the bracelet, or I should say the twin trigger double deploy and clasp. It's beautifully finished. There's contrasting brushed finish here, which you can see on the inside of the links, and then right next to it you can see the polished external folding members and the high polish on the flanks of the links, as well as the buckle itself, which has got a neat trick up its sleeve. Now while it is fixed at the ends with screws for security, it is a twin trigger design, so it has that security but also that ease of use that comes with a trigger mechanism on a deployant clasp. I really like that feature, and of course it closes with a satisfying snick on both sides. Beautifully built, beautifully finished, very thoughtful. But that goes for the rest of the watch as well. Now moving inboard from that slim halo-like bezel, you can see that there's a lot going on, but no part of this watch, despite the multitude of complications, features, and finishes, appears busy. It's very elegantly done. And from this head-on shot, you can see how those teardrop lugs, so pronounced and sharply defined from the side, just taper away when viewed from overhead, melting away to emphasize just that watch face. And what a face it is. Now you see, the hands are probably the most distinctive part, so I'm going to start with them and work my way out rather than working my way from the outside in. The hands are what Parmigiani calls delta hands. When I first saw them I thought, oh well, it's kind of a modified alpha, but we'll use their terminology, deltas. Now the other thing you're going to notice is that there is a vertical axis that's dominated by the second time zone features and the AM/PM indicators for each of the time zones. The time zone indicator that you see right here, 12:24 is the day-night for the local time at center. So you have your local time, and then you have an AM/PM indicator, and I've deliberately set both of the time zones to the same nominal time, but 12 hours apart. So you can see the function of the AM/PM indicator for local time, indicating that it is daytime where I am, but at my reference time, you can see it's just after 3 in the morning, being in the dark portion of the 24-hour scale. So you have that AM/PM indicator for each time zone. There's another interesting feature that this watch has. It actually gives you the ability to set the minutes of the second time zone independently of the local time, and that's a big deal because, as frequent travelers will know, it's not just a matter of jumping 1 hour ahead or 1 hour back as you pass through different time zones. That would be too easy. By the best recent count, there's something like 37 separate time zones globally. Some of them are cities that are on their own time. Some of them are even airports that are as little as 15 minutes apart from the local time. So the ability to set that minute scale as well as the reference time hour gives you a degree of flexibility that many dual time watches costing substantially more do not afford the owner. That's a great piece of manufacturer's savoir-faire from Parmigiani, and it shows the value of also building the movement when you design the watch. You can work in anything that you feel is suitable to optimize the purpose of the watch. And in terms of optimizing readability, it's impossible to miss. Big, bold, applied indices, faceted and polished, they all glimmer, and they really play nicely in the sun because they are faceted. So when one edge is muted, one edge is reflecting. When that edge is muted, the other edge is reflected. Gorgeous to behold. And two separate finishes on the dial. While it is ivory colored, it's a very flat, almost completely ungrained, untextured surface around the hour track. When you move inboard, you can see that the inner radius of this lower level on the dial, where it's been cut out, it's also been polished around its circumference for an impressive finishing effect. But then it's been given a texture, sort of an eggshell grain, what Parmigiani calls velvet. And the velvet is very distinct, very beautiful. At close range, this is a big watch. 42 millimeters for a dress watch borders on huge. But as big as it is, it's also detailed when you get closer to it. So not just an eyeful, but an eyeful under the loop. Parmigiani really spares no expense in building a dial that's worthy of the composition. Now each of these subdials at 6 o'clock and 12 o'clock does feature a very subtle concentric circular guilloche around the numeral track, and that adds yet more texture. Plus, even on something as secondary as the reference time, there are applied indices, and I really like that. That's the kind of attention to detail that sets the Parmigiani watches apart. And when you turn it over, you see the co-equal star of the show, which is Parmigiani's in-house caliber PF337. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is a true integrated manufacturer. It's one thing to build a case, it's one thing to build a dial, and it's one thing to build a world-class clasp. But when you're building movements and you're selling them to the likes of Richard Mille and Chopard, you've got to have some chops. And mechanically, Parmigiani has some of the best, not just for engineering, but also for decoration. Now, the watch does feature an architecture that's designed with complications in mind. Twin barrels driven in series, it has outstanding torque for turning complications like a second time zone, twin AM/PM indicators, as well as a jump date. And having those twin barrels gives a more even torque release over the course of the 50-hour power reserve that you get with this PF337 movement. So it's very consistent, adjusted in 5 positions for that 50 hours. You're going to get excellent isochronism, you're going to get reliability regardless of how you leave this thing sitting on your dresser, and you're going to get accurate timing performance. It is a very complex movement with 38 jewels and 316 parts. It has far more parts than, for instance, something like a Rolex 4130 chronograph, the one in the Daytona. So that gives you an idea of just how much goes into this relatively simple looking movement. And it's not just about the features like the hacking stop seconds so you can synchronize both time zones precisely. It's not just about the ceramic rotor bearings that allow the watch to wind efficiently and unidirectionally for even enhanced efficiency over the basic easy slide of the rotor bearings. The finish is what sets this watch apart, and I didn't realize until I got right up to it with a loupe that this watch featured a degree of finishing that I'd come to associate more closely with ultra-low volume manufacturers of Geneva than a company that is, quite honestly, a little-known industrial titan, and Parmigiani is serving a shocking number of high horology houses with under-the-table engineering and component manufacturing. They're not just a big factory, they're a traditional artisanal workshop. And when I looked at the anglage of this balance cock, of this winding rotor bridge under the loop, I was frankly shocked by what I found. It's big, fat, and polished to a mirror shine. No evidence of the artisanal file, absolutely no signs of machine finishing. I was frankly shocked to see that level of finish on a watch that really doesn't even push the boundaries of Parmigiani's engineering capacity. This is a company that does not essentially hold back its finest finishing for its highest complications. This is a dual-time watch, but it's finished with a standard superior to some tourbillons that I've seen from other manufacturers. Likewise, all of the countersinks for jewels and screws feature that same fat, mirror glossy anglage, or as it's called in the case of the countersinks, découvrage. Very beautiful. I just could not believe how smooth and regular each edge was. Not a sharp, severe angle, as you'll see with machine chamfering, but a rounded edge, the way you get from the best artisanal hand finish. Linear Côte de Genève, full guilloche rose gold winding rotor, beautifully done in its own right. I also detected black polish on the index itself, the screw heads, and I could see the pallet fork. Gorgeous finish where you can barely see it. I like to say, on a watch with a solid caseback, or a watch with parts you can't see that are finished to the highest standard, that is the ultimate sign of integrity by a manufacturer. In the case of Parmigiani, having come this far and put this much original art and science into this Tonda Hemispheres, why would they stop when it came time to finish the movement? And boy, do they finish. The bottom line is that this is a fantastic watch from a company that builds every part of the watch. It's definitely bigger, bolder, and more extrovert than your conventional dress reference, but if you like that look and you want something that's perhaps big like an Hublot, but packs a level of horological quality and content that you generally don't get in Hublot, Parmigiani is a great example of a company that will not let you down, will not disappoint. A little bit off the beaten path, the bottom line is that they have a lot to offer, and the closer you get to this Parmigiani Tonda Hemispheres, 42 millimeters in rose gold, the more you realize it just may be the watch you want.